because he is sensitive and has an imagination that only needs the proper guidance. Too many children become mere bourgeois ciphers with paunches and round minds full of tripe. They'll stay on Earth. That is, I mean, they'll be stuck in the mud." "You talk like no insurance salesman I've ever met." "Like all those who really want to sell, I'm a born psychologist," Mister shrilled. "Actually, I have an advantage. I have a Ph.D. in psychology. I would prefer staying at home for laboratory work, but since I can help my starving children, I am not joking, so much more by coming to a foreign land and working at something that will put food in their mouths, I do it. I can't stand to see my little ones go hungry. Moreover," he said with a wave of his long-fingered hand, "this whole planet is really a lab that beats anything within four walls." "You spoke of famine. Your accent, your name. You're a Greek, aren't you?" "In a way," said Mister. "My name translated means gracious, or kindly, or well-meaning." His voice became brisker. "The translation is apropos. I'm here to do you a service. Now, about these monthly premiums." Jack shook himself and stepped out of the mold of fascination that Mister's glasses seemed to have poured around him. Uncas again, he crawled on all fours from chair to divan to stool to the fallen log which the adults thought was an easy chair. He stuck his head from behind it and sighted along the broomstick musket at his father. He'd shoot that white man dead and then take his scalp. He giggled at that, because his father really didn't have any hairlock to take. At that moment Mister decided to take off his specs and polish them with his breast pocket handkerchief. While he answered one of Mr. Crane's questions, he let them dangle from his fingers. Accidentally, the lenses were level with Jack's gaze. One careless glance was enough to jerk his eyes back to them. One glance stunned him so that he could not at once understand that what he was seeing was not reality. There was his father across the room, but it wasn't a room. It was a space outdoors under the low branch of a tree whose trunk was so big it was as wide as the wall had been. Nor was the Persian rug there. It was replaced by a close-cropped bright green grass. Here and there foot-high flowers with bright yellow petals tipped in scarlet swayed beneath an internal wind. Close to Mr. Crane's feet a white horse, no larger than a fox terrier, bit off the flaming end of a plant. All those things were wonderful enough, but was that naked giant who sprawled upon a moss-covered boulder his father? No. Yes. Though the features were no longer pinched and scored and pale, though they were glowing and tanned and smooth like a young athlete's, they were his father's. Even the thick curly hair that fell down over a wide forehead and the panther-muscled body could not hide his identity. Though it tore at his nerves, and though he was afraid that once he looked away he would never again seize the vision, Jack ripped his gaze away from the rosy view. The descent to the gray and rasping reality was so painful that tears ran down his cheeks, and he gasped as if struck in the pit of his stomach. How could beauty like that be all around him without his knowing it? He felt that he had been blind all his life until this moment, and would be forever eyeless again, and unbearable forever, if he did not look through the glass again. He stole another hurried glance, and the pain in his heart and stomach went away. His insides became wrapped in a soft wind. He was lifted. He was floating. A pale red, velvety air caressed him and buoyed him. He saw his mother run from around the tree. That should have seemed peculiar, because he had thought she was dead. But there she was, no longer flat-walking and coughing and thin and wax-skinned, but golden brown and curvy and bouncy. She jumped at Daddy and gave him a long kiss. Daddy didn't seem to mind that she had no clothes on. Oh, it was wonderful. Jack was drifting on a yielding and wine-tinted air, and warmed with a wind that seemed to swell him out like a happy balloon. Suddenly he was falling, hurtling helplessly and sickeningly through a void, while a cold and drab blast gouged his skin and spun him around and around. The world he had always known shoved hard against him. Again he felt the blow in the solar plexus, and saw the gray tentacles of the living reality reach for his heart. Jack looked up at the stranger, who was just about to put his spectacles on the bridge of his long nose. His eyelids were closed. Jack never did see the pink eyes. That didn't bother him. He had other things to think about. He crouched beside the chair while his brain tried to move again, tried to engulf a thought, and failed because it could not become fluid enough to find the idea that would move his tongue to shriek, "No, no, no!" And when the salesman rose and placed his papers in his case, and patted Jack on the head, and bent his opaque rose spectacles at him, and said good bye, and that he wouldn't be coming back because he was going out of town to stay, Jack was not able to move or say a thing. Nor for a long time after the door had closed could he break through the mass that gripped him like a hardened lava. By then no amount of screams and weeping would bring Mister back. All his father could do was call a doctor, who took the boy's temperature and gave him some pills. Section 4. Jack stood inside the wire and bent his neck back to watch a huge black and silver oyster feel the dusk for a landing field with its single white foot and its orange toes. Blindingly, lights sprang to attention over the camp. When Jack had blinked his eyes back to normal, he could see over the flat half-mile between the fence and the ship. It lay quiet and glittering and smoking in the flood beams. He could see the round door in its side swing open. Men began filing out. A truck rumbled across the plain and pulled up beside the metal bulk. A very tall man stepped out of the cab and halted upon the running board, from which he seemed to be greeting the newcomers or giving them instructions. Whatever he was saying took so long that Jack lost interest. Lately he had not been able to focus his mind for any length of time upon anything except that one event in the past. He wandered around and whipped glances at his comrades' faces, noting listlessly that their uniforms and shaved heads had improved their appearance, but nothing would be able to chill the feverishness of their eyes. Whistles shrilled. Jack jumped. His heart beat faster. He felt as if the end of the quest were suddenly close. Somebody would be around the corner. In a minute that person would be facing him, and then he reflected, and sagged with a wave of disappointment at the thought. Then there was nobody around the corner. It always happened that way. Besides, there weren't any corners in this camp. He had reached the wall at the end of the alley. Why didn't he stop looking? Sergeants lined the prisoners up four abreast, preparatory to marching them into the barracks. Jack supposed it was time to turn in for the night. He submitted to their barked orders and hard hands without resentment. They seemed a long way off. For the 10,000th time he was thinking that this need not have happened. If he had been man enough to grapple with himself, to wrestle as Jacob did with the angel, and not let loose until he had felled the problem, he could be teaching philosophy in a quiet little college his father did. He had graduated from high school with only average marks, and then, instead of going to college as his father had so much wanted him to, he had decided to work a year. With his earnings he would see the world. He had seen it, but when his money ran out he had not returned home. He had drifted, taking jobs here and there, sleeping in flop houses, jungles, park benches, and freight cars. When the newly created Bureau of Health and Sanity had frozen jobs in an effort to solve the transiency problem, Jack had refused to work. He knew that he would not be able to quit a job without being arrested at once. Like hundreds of thousands of other youths, he had begged and stolen and hidden from the local police and the Bohas. Even through all those years of misery and wandering, he had not once admitted to himself the true nature of this fog-cottoned Grail. He knew it, and he did not know it. It was patrolling the edge of his mind, circling a far-off periphery, recognizable by a crude silhouette, but nameless. Any time he wanted to, he could have summoned it closer and said, "You are it, and I know you, and I know what I am looking for. It is what? Worthless, foolish, insane, a dream?" Jack had never had the courage to take that action. When it seemed the thing was galloping closer, charging down upon him, he ran away. It must stay on the horizon, moving on, always moving, staying out of his grasp. "All you guys, forward arch!" Jack did not move. The truck from the rocket had come through a gate and stopped by the transies, and about 50 men were getting off the back. The man behind Jack bumped into him. Jack paid him no attention. He did not move. He squinted at the group who had come from the rocket. They were very tall, hump-shouldered, and dressed in light gray-green Palm Beach suits and tan Panama hats. Each held a brown leather briefcase at the end of a long, thin arm. Each wore on the bridge of his nose a pair of rose-colored glasses. A cry broke hoarsely from the transies. Some of those in front of Jack fell to their knees as if a sudden poison had paralyzed their legs. They called names and stretched out open hands. A boy by Jack's side sprawled face down on the sand while he uttered over and over again, "Mr. Pelopius, Mr. Pelopius." The name meant nothing to Jack. He did feel repulsed at seeing the fellow turn on his side, bend his neck